private road.
Yeah, but
I'm
that was
looking
one of
everything.
the
I'm
concerns
thinking,
that's,
please, please grow.
they can explain
I want
how
the
it
land to
works.
be given to us by these commissioners.
Okay, good.
Oh, the assisted living.
Yeah.
Talking about the assisted
It's
living.
a weird
how it
site.
isn't
It's so tight. I mean,
landscaping
the
isn't
shape.
where it needs
I
to be.
wish they could get some of this. It would make everything so much better, but that's not happening.
He's mentioning about the
Strange site.
assisted
One,
living
two,
landscaping.
three.
Oh, yeah.
Almost
it's not
4 frontages.
yet.
I mean, if
No,
that's
it's
even
not.
possible.
I don't even think they got their CAO,
Awesome.
but I see they got to sign up tours.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah, I don't have any idea where they're at inside.
I don't either. But I think the other thing is, we talk about
I was at school today.
walkable
My
communities,
son's,
but if you
today
come
was
out
the
of
National
Charter
Letter of
Club,
Intent signing day.
How, did Jackson give an E ETA?
He said.
and you come down their sidewalk, it turns.
It's 5 minutes, we can,
He's
5:32?
One comes out, turns.
So there's no crossing.
Nope.
ETA 5:32, if you wanna wait, if you wanna hold 5 minutes for him, we could, or he can just come in late.
Or just slowly
That's
approve
okay,
the
right?
80 minutes.
It's up to you.
Hold or get started.
I
think
think we
it's
should start, yeah.
Just talk.
By the time we.
Get through.
Say the pledge very soon.
That means you too. Everybody ready? Okay, at this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission for Wednesday, May 8th, 2024. At this time, could we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this time, could we have a roll call, please?
Sherry Budd, Bernie Grant,
Here.
Peter Creel,
Here.
Hutchinson is excused, Jackson Paul,
Here.
Helen.
Okay, at this time, we have an agenda before us. Do we have any notations, additions, or deletions to the agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
Make a motion to accept the agenda.
Support?
We have a motion to accept the agenda and support. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Minutes. We have the minutes from the meeting of April 24th, 2024 before us. Do we have any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I have a question regarding the minutes. In the previous meeting, we had asked staff to consider whether or not there was a setback issue with the fireworks tent. Noted in the minutes that staff would take a look at that. Has that been done yet?
We were gonna hold off until they were getting ready to put the tent up on site. I haven't gone out there and verified it yet, no.
That's all I
But
wanted
we
to know.
will make sure that we do that.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd move to approve the minutes as submitted for the meeting of April 24th, 2023. 24. 24.
Support.
We have a motion to accept the minutes as presented for April 24th, 2024, and to support. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We don't have any correspondence or announcements at this time. Public hearing, none. Old business, none. We're ready to move ahead with the new business. We have item number 1, case 23-064, Culver's Drive, double drive-through, preliminary and final site plan. A request by applicant MCON Building Corporation on behalf of Culver's to add an additional drive-through lane. The site is Zone C2, extensive highway business, and is located at 11,001 Belleville Road. Parcel ID 83-05901-0008-001. on the south side of North Interstate 94 Service Drive, east side of Belleville Road. This time, do we have a presentation from the staff? Director Akers.
Thank you. I will refer to our planner, Ms. Krishnan.
Thank you, Director Akers, members of the commission. As you summarized, the request before you tonight is to add a second drive-through lane to the existing Culver's restaurant located on I-94 North Service Drive. The site is 1.08 acres in size and is zoned C1, which is general business, and it does fall within the Belleville Road Overlay District, what we refer to as B-ROD, which carries higher standards for building design and pedestrian amenities. With regard to the zoning and use itself, a drive-through is typically a special land use in the C1 district. However, the applicant is not altering the use on the site, merely adding a second drive-through lane. As such, new special land use approval is not required at this time, just site plan approval. The building dimensions and setbacks are not being changed, so they will remain as they are and maintain compliance. With regard to site layout and circulation, the ordinance limits sites in the C1 to no more than 1 point of ingress and egress for every 500 feet. And the site is compliant at this time. It has got one two-way access drive to the north along the site's I-94 service drive frontage. If I'm sure all of you have visited the site, it's a very unusually shaped site with frontages on almost all sides, making it very complicated in terms of reviewing which would be front, side, and rear yards for this property. Because of that, cross-access to any of the abutting properties is really not feasible or even possible. With regard to emergency access, circulation diagrams have been provided, and the circulation diagrams show sufficient circulation around the site. This was discussed at length even during the staff review meeting for this project, and it was discussed that in the event of a fire or something, it would be easier to fight it from the off-ramp than to actually try to get into the backside of the drive-through itself and fight it, because the site is so awkwardly placed. With regard to sidewalks and crosswalks, they are existing around the site of the building, and they will largely remain, except for the concrete walkway that is near the building, will be shortened in order to make room for the additional drive-through lane. The crosswalk that is striped from the public sidewalk along the service drive frontage to the site itself is also going to be restriped on the parking lot and will be maintained. Based upon the ordinance's parking requirements, the site is compliant with the required number of parking spaces. The challenge with the site is stacking spaces for the drive-through. Our ordinance is one of the stricter ones, and the reason we have such strict regulations is based on problems we have had prior years. So when these ordinance regulations were adopted, they are stricter than most other ordinances that you will come across. We basically require 5 stacking spaces between the order station and the pickup window, and 10 stacking spaces up to the order station itself. The Planning Commission does allow the ordinance does allow the Planning Commission to modify the standard, provided an applicant provides you with adequate justification that a reduced number of stacking spaces, either between the order station and the pickup window or up to the order station, would still result in the site functioning well without creating issues on the abutting streets. The applicant has submitted examples of 6 other Culver locations with similar drive-through lane modifications, and has also included photographs that show what they consider as their rush hour, which is basically during lunchtime, all of the lunchtime hours, to show that the stacking works based upon what they have provided. So they do have 9 stacking spaces between the order station and the pickup window. We require 5, they have 9, so they have 4 more. But 10 spaces are required up to the order station, and they have only 6, so they are 4 short. One of the concerns we did have, if when the applicant presents, you will see the site plan up on your screen, that when you see the 2 vehicles stacked in the 2 drive-through lanes, there is a clearance of only about 10.5 feet behind the stacked vehicle. Now, for two-way circulation, it's typically, we all know it's a 24-foot wide aisle. This will impede on-site circulation, but the applicant had stated that they have a system where the site's functioning works. So I am going to defer to the applicant during their presentation to explain to the Planning Commission satisfaction how the stacking will work and how incidents of vehicles getting blocked on the site, unable to exit, or vehicles actually ending up, once again, all clustered around the entrance to the site itself will be avoided. The site is compliant with the required number of barrier-free accessible spaces. All of the spaces that are on the site are to remain as is. Some of the existing drive aisles on the site are non-compliant. They do not meet our current ordinance standards. But in order to make them compliant, you will lose a lot of parking spaces from this site, and the site cannot afford to lose those spaces. So this is an existing non-conformity which we recommend be allowed to remain as is. The ordinance has got various landscaping requirements for frontage, parking lot screening, street rights of way, interior parking, and loading area. And this site is also subject to the BROD landscaping standards. The site has got an originally approved landscape plan that is associated with it. And the applicant has noted that there will be a net zero impact. Basically, they will comply with the originally approved landscape plan. Any missing or any dead or diseased plants will be removed and replaced in order to comply with the plan that is already on file as approved. With regard to all the existing mechanical equipment on the site is sufficiently screened by existing landscaping. One of the requirements of the Belleville Road Overlay District is pedestrian accessibility and amenities, and that requires one bike rack to be provided for every 25 vehicle spaces. So since there are 50 parking spaces, you need 2 bike racks, and our recommendation is they be provided somewhere close to the building entrance. There is a landscape area, or next to the sidewalk, they could easily install a simple bike rack to meet the ordinance standards. The existing trash enclosure does meet the ordinance standards. With regard to signage, there are 2 menu boards proposed for the new drive-through lanes, and they are required to be less than 8 feet tall and less than 60 square feet in size and not visible from the rights of way. The menu boards are just over 6 feet tall and approximately 46 square feet, which includes the Culver's logo below the signs and will remain below the 60 square feet. Although we reviewed it, it will be reviewed once again by staff before a sign permit is issued in order to make sure that the site is compliant with the sign ordinance requirements. There is not much impervious surface area change in the site as it exists, so we will defer to the township engineer with regard to any stormwater or other utility issues. As I previously mentioned, the site is very unusually shaped. It's a slanted trapezoid with frontage on 3 sides, which limits the placement of structures and improvements on the site. Most of the improvements are existing, with the exception of addition of the second drive-through lane and the associated menu board. So through the site plan review process, our goal was to try to bring the site as much into compliance with the ordinance standards as is possible. It cannot entirely comply without creating other issues, so we did it to the extent it was possible. It's our recommendation at this time that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final site plan approval for the addition of a second drive-through lane and site improvements at Culver's, located at 11001 Belleville Road, subject to following conditions: approval of the requested modification from the stacking space requirement and addition of a circulation, addressing the circulation plan at the entrance to the Planning Commission's satisfaction, inclusion of 2 bike racks near the building entrance, approval of all signage by township staff, and finally township engineers' approval of the plans. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
The request of Van Buren, Fitchbeck reviewed the site plans dated April 17th, 2024, submitted to the township for preliminary and final site plan review for the proposed drive-through lane addition at the Culver's, located at 11001 Belleville Road on Van Buren. This project does not involve any work to existing township utilities, nor does it include adding any new utilities. So our review was fairly limited. Our most recent letter did not include any additional engineering review comments. The only real engineering issue that we worked through early on in the process with the applicant was stormwater. We made sure that if they added pavement, they were mindful to, if they could remove some pavement elsewhere on the site to balance out the impervious area so they wouldn't have to go for stormwater management approvals from us or the county. So that was about the extent of our engineering review. So at this time, Fishbeck recommends the Planning Commission grant the Culvers Drive-Through Lane project preliminary and final site plan approval based on our engineering review. If you have any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Director Akers?
Oh, there we go. Thank you. So the Van Buren Township Fire Department also reviewed the plan. They had issued a letter dated April 23rd, 2024. To summarize, they had indicated that per the applicant's letter dated April 17th, 2024, in sheet 4, the latest submittal, emergency vehicle access had been addressed and is adequate. And that was the review that was completed by our fire marshal. They had reviewed it and found it to be adequate and their concerns addressed.
Okay, thank you. At this time, do we have a presentation from the applicant?
Whoa.
It's weird, my screen just went blank. My name is Mike Courier. I'm from Surveying and Mapping. We are the surveyor and engineer. I've been working, the applicant would be Macon Corporation, who is the GC for S&L Properties, who they are the largest franchisee of Culvers in the United States. I think they have 90 stores across 5 states and continuing to grow. Sorry, I gotta plug this in. So we've done, I think, 72 double drive-throughs across the Midwest, the greater Midwest, you know, kind of rehabbing these old stores and doing similar things to like what you're seeing here. One comparable in this right general neck of the woods would be Westland. It's, you can kind of see the existing was a one row, one sign, and then we converted basically and bumped out, lost a few parking stalls, and kind of work it around. Coming back to kind of the main concept of this site. Sorry, go to this one here. Basically, how Culvers works is customers come in, they make their order, and they go through and they pay, and then after they pay, they go to a customer waiting area, which is a little bit unique to Culvers. So the idea of how they cycle people through is different than your standard, where you're not just waiting at the window to pick up your food. So we have found through all these other examples that the double drive-through works. Culvers was very late to the double drive-throughs. The corporate would not allow it for the longest time. COVID hit, and there was a really big need for double drive-throughs. And so S&L was on the forefront of being able, especially being the largest forefront, like, look, this is a need, we're doing this, and corporate got behind and everything. Since then, since that time period, we found out the function of this has been beneficial to the customer experience, for the restaurant, and everyone as a whole, and especially site circulation. Like I'm sure many of you, I don't have the best patience when I'm waiting in line. What we've found as with this second option, if you have cars come through with a large family or a complicated order, you know, they're there for longer than you feel like they should be. With this second option, you know, you have someone that's getting a treat or they're getting a butter burger, you know, a single person. We have found that this thing gives an alternative for them for this other line and not stack the line up behind the menu board, where this other ulterior option gets them into the queue, which we call shoot, and then gets them to the order menu, they pay, and then they move forward, and basically keeps this constant flow of traffic, regardless of if you have someone slow at the order menu. In the current configuration, you have one person there that never been to Culver's. Culver's menu is large, you know, it's got lots of options. You know, it can really tend to have an issue. But by having this second lane and allowing that function to happen, we've had really good results and have been able to make it come together for basically the customer experience, have a better enjoyable time. The kitchen is set up for the amount of traffic for this additional lane. And they do have 2 separate people that take a lane from each individual order station. So it's not like they're bouncing back and forth or anything like that. I do understand you guys have had some traffic concerns for the site, for the queuing and the stacking. Looking at the existing, basically, there's this existing line, so it's 10.5 feet from it basically is a one aisle, or just under one aisle should technically be in the existing configuration. Basically, I believe most customers in this area are usually function this site in a counterclockwise motion. And we basically would be continuing that same general pattern that the customers have been used to. As Vidya mentioned, we are at 6 and we still have that same pinch point. Based upon our experience from the other locations we've done across the Midwest, we have not seen 3 cars back up in both lanes during that rush hour period in random snapshots between 11 and 1:30. So, I mean, this is usually a worst-case scenario. Like I said, you have that line that's usually generally going to move quicker than the other, or depending on who your people are. And then the other good thing, like Vidya mentioned, we do have a lot more in the chute. So it's basically a large improvement from what is there now. And then also gives the option of all those cars as they pay to move forward to customer waiting. We weren't able to do another configuration with this double drive-through. By shoving it out further, you made a pinch point for safety vehicles access. And just like, it's a very unique shape. I'll say it's one of a kind for that I've worked on. But we feel that this is the best consideration, best design that it was there and available for customer safety, customer experience, and then also dealing with some of the traffic concerns of backing up into that way, that this would then be a very large improvement from what is currently there and address the current issues. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them or talk anything through or show a different diagram.
Thank you. Planning Commission, do we have any comments, questions?
Through the chair, I do have maybe just to talk it through a little bit. I've experienced this backup many times, and actually I've seen it 3 and 4 stacked out into the service drive, where I had to actually maneuver into the center turn lane in order to get around it, or else you end up sitting almost in the intersection at the corner.
Wow.
I mean, so I've experienced it more than a couple of times, and I'm sure there's probably plenty of times where I've never seen it. So I know it happens as a starting point, and I understand and appreciate the fact that you're trying to alleviate that concern, which I think the way the diagram is drawn, which is what this is, that it appears to do that. Because if you look at your numbers, I believe you have like 15 cars shown here, and then on the other version, you don't. But if you take your original one, if you actually added cars back to the service drive, your 15th car ends up being right at the entrance to the, so you're bringing it off the service drive. So there's no doubt about, if you're drawing a graphic, that happens. But then my other thought is that you're moving the order station further into the road, and in order for your stacking to actually work that way, it's very dependent on the individual worker within the restaurant taking orders in a timely fashion so that you maintain that stack up. If you don't maintain that stack up and you maintain gaps, your order station will end up pushing people back into the road again. So it's very important that that the person in the building actually makes sure that they take those orders quickly.
Right. Which is great. We'll be moving to 2 from 1 right now.
Right.
Yep.
So I mean, it's very dependent on that, and I know how this really works. If you added more cars, you probably, I mean, in my mind, I know what happens as far as how this ordering goes. Those stations that you show, which would be to the east of where the order receiving window is, those all get stacked up, guarantee it. They all get filled, and all those parking spots on the east side of the site, half of those most of the time get filled. And this is during peak times. I'm not saying all the time.
Understood. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
It's very difficult to get through there at times with people with the big SUVs.
Yeah.
And the mirrors sticking out, some don't park near the curb.
Yeah, the site is a little tight, especially for, like Vidya mentioned, for some of the aisleways. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about that
Yeah.
at this time.
In your cars in your diagram, they're like touching end to end, and that's not gonna happen. You know what I mean? People are gonna maintain a distance of like 4 feet at least in between them. You know, the chances are pretty good that you're still gonna push people back into the intersection at peak times. But I mean, I don't know what else you can do. My guess is that you're gonna help to alleviate that condition to some degree. But I mean, you're very popular, right? I mean, it's gonna happen again. I just think it'll be a lesser degree. That's what I think is gonna happen.
So an improvement.
But I think it's a maybe. I'm not convinced 100%. The other thing, and the reason why I say that is, and I'll make another comment before I say that, is that you're still cutting off your own parking lot. See that, you know, if it stacks up, you're gonna cut your own parking lot off, and people aren't gonna be able to access that parking lot and get in there. I experienced that. Hey, let's go to Culver's. Nope, the cars are blocking the parking lot. You can't go in. So you skip by that. Here's another observation. With this stacking arrangement here, the thing is, human nature says, hey, there's a short line. And they'll start stacking up again, because I bypassed that many times because the line's too long. But if you start stacking, if you're showing your diagram, you're saying, now I'm moving the people off the service drive because you get a double line, you may get more customers and push that thing back out into the service drive again. So I'm not, you just might be making more money, you know, with the double line.
Customer experience to be good too. So, I mean, if it's always a long line, people probably won't go there. So the idea is with this second lane, it gives that second person to take orders. It gives that other way to move things through and make it flow a little better.
If
Is what we-
somebody were to come with this site to build the drive-through today, a new one, we would never support it. Not the conditional land use, not the site
I
plan.
looked at this and I go, there's got to be a better, from the beginning, it's like hindsight, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm thinking, that's the worst place to put the entrance drive for the drive-through, because you blocked your own parking lot.
Yeah.
Which means you block your own customers from getting in there. And it's very difficult to get out too, when you have to travel and go through all those cars that are waiting.
Yeah, I personally have done 110 Culvers between ground ups and drive-throughs. To me, these are puzzles. Like, I love them. I get them. I sit there, move things around, and like I look at a site and I have an idea. And this one was definitely a little more funky. I mean, the idea was definitely clear what to do with what it was, but it was just like, you know, sometimes the sun just shines on them, and you're like, oh yeah, this is it. And then this one, I was like, this is gonna work. It's definitely gonna be an improvement, but it wasn't, you know, the best thing we could ever come up with. But the site is just so confined.
It feels like the drive should be a little bit more to the east, so that and then your order line is a little bit more to the right, so that you get in and around.
The problem
That's
with,
a
like
big
you said,
change.
we losing more parking than at that point, and then also at the back of houses, you have all your utilities that come in there where we couldn't scrunch in too much more.
Maybe. I guess my opinion on this is, I think it's a good attempt to try to get cars off the service drive. I don't know what else you can do with your existing conditions without really taking a big look at it. But I'm not 100% convinced it's not going to still cause issues on the backup. And it almost feels like, well, let's try it and see, you know, because I don't know if this is a solution to try it, but I don't know if it's actually going to solve the problem. I think you'll get more customers.
So
I mean, I'll hop in that line if I know it's shorter. So I'm going to start stacking up for you.
About the site, where the building is placed, where the drive-through entrance is
Yeah.
placed, the way the parking is angled, the way it's set up,
Yeah.
nothing is ideal. I don't know at what point of time this building was built, but this is not a site plan that would pass even the first step of our review process if it were.
Able to rotate the building.
Yeah, if the whole building could be rotated,
Right.
maybe even then, this is a very,
Yeah.
very
But you could
small,
travel
very
around
tight.
it, get to the back, stay out of the parking lot.
I would definitely make it one way if you could blow the whole thing in.
Grant, they're trying to fix the situation.
I know.
It may alleviate it, but may is the keyword over here.
Right.
So,
So through the chair, I'm looking at it, I guess, is it causing any more harm? Right?
No.
And I think I
No.
don't think it's causing any
No.
more harm.
No.
I think I count more cars, right? I mean, there's 5 more cars that could be stacked up once you're in play, or in the chute, as you called it. But I don't think it's causing any additional harm. I don't think there's any reason to, my opinion.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think that's what, the same thing. It's like,
Yeah.
it's an attempt to solve a problem. It's not it's not creating a worse problem. It might make it better,
Yeah.
but there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
Because my opinion is, I think just get more customers that won't bypass the parking lot, because I've done it lots of times. I zip on by when I see the cars hit that drive part, I'm gone. I would just skip it. But if I see cars the way you draw it, I'd go in line.
Through the chair. I guess I agree with, my concern is when you've got the two stations and you've got cars coming in, that you could easily block that west parking lot because they aren't going to be able to get through. Because people won't leave enough room for someone to squeeze between them and cars that are parked right there. So how many people can't get in and park? And will that snag up anything any worse? But on the flip side, during staff review, when we talked about the gentleman, he said with the two lines and the kitchens continually going, it's going to get people through faster. So they're not going to have to wait as long because the food is going to be continually being prepared. So that should stop it. As someone who lives down the street from there,
So there's a change of operations as well.
it's certainly a good place to stop on the end as long as there's not a line.
Basically, the kitchen is the same, but it can handle that workload, like basically from all these other stores that they've done. And that second person taking the orders is the key. But as far as like the function of the building is going to stay like it is, this is just an external thing.
Yeah, they're gonna have to speed up, because I've waited there for 25 minutes before, 25 minutes. I waited there one time so long, they came out and gave me a certificate to come back for the next time. They just forgot. I mean, it's an error. It happens.
It's not fast food, is it, at that point?
Well, it makes me feel better that it wasn't. No, but I would agree. I mean, bottom line is, I think you need to try to do something to help the problem. It's not making it worse. It's not ideal. You still may have that issue, but at least you get more customers.
I mean, it is a significant investment for the owners to
Yeah.
put this in and whatever, and like I said, they've done like 74 of these or something like that, so they feel it's been helping, obviously helps numbers, but circulation is a big thing for the customer experience.
Commissioner Jar?
Question for the applicant. It looks to me like you have spots currently that are after the pickup window, stacking after the pickup window, like at least 6 spots called out in the existing diagram, but they're removed from the proposed diagram. Could you shed a little light on what's going to happen with regard to stacking when you no longer move cars forward?
So those are currently non-compliant, so we had to remove them. So there wasn't room to show a lane. They existed by use, but they were not compliant. So in removing those, and we had to put in, the site didn't have 2 RV or oversized vehicle parks, so we placed those there. And then what we'll basically transitioning is to the east line there will then become the customer waiting stalls.
We did not want to encourage that, Commissioner Jar, because if those vehicles, if they obviously stripe it as waiting spaces, that chute, if there is an RV parked, nothing is getting through, a bicycle maybe. So we didn't want to encourage it. Somebody might just pull up till somebody runs out and gives them their order, but we don't want to make it obvious that, hey, this is a spot where you can wait. We would rather they go and park in there and get their order.
And if those are regularly used as stacking spaces, do they count as regular parking? The line on the east? I mean, if they're regularly being counted as a post-window stacking spot, you understand what I'm asking?
Yes. There is nothing in the ordinance that says that parking spaces cannot be used for stacking too after an order has been placed and paid for. As long as you're not blocking the aisle, it doesn't matter if you're parked waiting for your order to come to you, be delivered to you outside.
Ask the applicant if it's all right. Is any of this site have any one-way striping in the lot, or it kind of looks like it's one-way, but is it marked as such in any way?
The angled parking along here definitely encourages the one-way, and it's the natural flow of almost 100% of, 90% of most drive-throughs you go through. They have that counterclockwise motion. There is no stripes per se out there. I mean, if it's something that is of a concern or you think would help flow, we would be in favor. We can add some thermoplastic striping for arrows in this general area if you think it would help. But as the current, plan to revise the drive-through, we have not, went to the whole parking lot, but
Where your mouse is on that screen, if you jiggle it, just that right there, that little gray trapezoid, what is that?
concrete. So basically, in essence, when we do these sites, they do them in a matter of days. Because the idea that restaurant's down, that's a problem. So they usually try to function, leave it is. So what they intend to do, this is the part of the old drive-through window. Actually, I'll just zoom in.
Perfect, thank you.
So in going to, this is our demolition plan. So basically, we'd be removing that curb island. And so when they go through, it's just a one crew. They come through and put everything back in one-stop shop. So there's no sense in messing with asphalt for just these real small jobs. So they put everything back in
So
concrete.
that's gonna be a single concrete pour to make
Yes,
up
sir.
for the parts
Absolutely.
that's removed.
Yep.
Is there anything that prevents a vehicle, other than, natural flow from, if you'd zoom out just a little bit, show the whole
Absolutely.
site. Is there anything that prevents a car traveling westward on the service drive, turning left into the driveway where your mouse is there, and then turning left again and going around the building the other way, and then ducking into that outside lane? Any signage that would prevent that?
Currently not. I mean, if there's concern, we could put a stop bar here or put a, one-way sign here if that's something that's of concern to the plan commission. I think,
Concerned about if we've got
I
traffic.
know what you, yeah,
So if we've got traffic coming in from Belleville Road heading east, and they turn a right into the site, and that direction is suddenly blocked, you could have someone look at the situation coming and traveling to the west, look at it and say, oh, well, I can get into that outside line if I come around the building backwards and then just duck in. And I'm afraid someone might try to do that.
I think a couple things would be against the natural flow of that. I mean, for one thing, this site's well-established. People have been going there for a long time and see how things have functioned and flow, so it's not like it's a new. But then I think when you get back in here, it'd be very hard to find I guess if you had a smart car or something, you could probably queue up and turn around. I know there's no way in hell I could make that turn in my truck, but.
Might help, if I may suggest, if you add, angled parking implies one-way circulation. If you add one-way striping just up till here, and over here, a pole sign is posted saying no entry at this point, because 90-degree parking implies two-way parking. And if somebody is turning in here and these stacked vehicles block it, I think it is reasonable for them to go this way and park here or want to park over here. But beyond this section needs to remain one-way to prevent the site from getting blocked.
I've done that,
I,
exactly what you described. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
So maybe a no entry sign over here, so people know beyond this point they cannot cross.
And we can put a solid stripe across it too.
Yes.
It's a good visual.
And then if you have one-way striping, that sort of gives the impression that where it is one-way.
Okay.
Normally, we wouldn't recommend a mix of one and two-way. It's confusing,
I know,
but
but in this case, especially when there looks like there's a path where you can duck around and possibly hit the other drive-through. Now,
concern is somebody trying to reverse over here, coming over here is now, there is a car here and there is somebody trying to come this way and suddenly they're head-to-head with another vehicle over here.
and
One
then
of
you've
them
got
will have to
you've got
back
a
up, which is
gridlock,
not a good
right, and that's not
the way
good.
it is today, right? I mean, technically, it's two-way today, but when they're busy, they're stacked on both sides, and there's no one getting through.
and I think, I mean, when I've seen anybody park like in those three particularly, a lot of times it's the help. Because sometimes they're parked in there, in the three, and they will stack people in the far east ones and in some of them other east ones, depending on how much, like right there, how many people are coming through. And that is so narrow, if anybody thought they could get around, they better think twice. But I think most people get the hint right away. Even if you turn left, they're either gonna park right there in front of the building, or they're gonna park in one of those first threes. But I've never seen anybody try to come any further around. It ain't gonna work.
Well, it wouldn't work in the current design. You can't really get yourself angled into the drive-through, can you? Oh, I guess you could. Yeah, okay. I do think the one-way circulation on the back would be a good addition that might serve to help the traffic flow on the site. It may not do, maybe it doesn't make any difference at all, but at least you tried.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, you know somebody's gonna try. You know somebody's gonna
And
try.
I do understand the applicant's point that this is a well-known site, it's been there for a while, but it is also a highway business, which means we do get people coming off of the road traveling that have never been to our Belleville Road intersection and never been to the Culvers in Van Buren Township, and maybe aren't as familiar with it. I had just one other question for the applicant. Or maybe, Director Akers, maybe you could explain this report just a little bit that you've handed out to us. This is I believe, a police report citing the traffic complaints at the Culvers.
So prior to the meeting, it was asked that we contact the police department and get instances where we've had traffic complaints where police department has had to go out there and address the traffic that backs up onto the service drive. Thank you, Ms. Harmon, for being able to put it together so quickly for us. So on the spreadsheet, the highlighted, so there's 7 instances over the last 3 years where the police have been called to address traffic that, or well, potentially have been 7 instances to address traffic that's backed up onto the service drive. So the 4 highlighted items that occurred in 2021 were all confirmed that's what they were called out to do, to address traffic that had been backing up. The other 3, which one was April 2024, another was October 2023, and another was June 2023. Those ones did not have notes, but they may have been for that. So these are all the calls and complaints that the police department has had over that 3-year period.
My observation on the report is that these are being made because traffic's backing up onto the service drive. If you look at the time on these, this isn't happening at lunchtime. This isn't even happening at dinner time. This is happening between about 8 p.m. and 9:30 at night, according to the police report. My question, since you've said that you've looked at the traffic stacking at the busy time of the day during lunch, we don't think that's necessarily the busy time of the day, or maybe that's just not the time when people are reporting a traffic problem. But have you looked at what the traffic flow is around a Culvers like this during the evening, let's say slightly after dinner, let's go get an ice cream time?
No, we have not that exact time, because usually that's not our peak time. I see these are concerns, but I think with this second lane, if it's someone's just stopping to get ice cream, that's a very quick order. So with that second drive-through, I think that's gonna really help this situation of that. If there's someone making an order where everyone else is just there for ice cream, I think that's gonna give that option for them to then maneuver around or maneuver that line ahead to speed this process up.
Okay, thanks. And last question was one for staff, or any commissioner who remembers. I know we had a requirement in the ordinance for 5 between the order station and 10 at the order station stacking. This site clearly doesn't have that. It's existing as 5 and 6. I know that the Planning Commission currently has the ability to modify the requirement at the Planning Commission's discretion. My question is, when this site was originally approved, was the requirement still 5 plus 10, and did the Planning Commission at the time choose this stacking modification, or did the ordinance come in after that?
I am not sure when the site was originally built, but the 5 and 10 is a recent modification. When I say recent modification, that is probably in the last 5+ years.
I thought it might have been.
It's standard in almost every other zoning ordinance is 5 and 5. We put it as 5 and 10 over here because we had a couple of sites where it was really a nuisance. So we thought, when new sites are being designed, let them design it with full thing, and the Planning Commission can decide if that is an overkill.
I think I remember which one of those sites was.
I don't remember which one. This one?
If my memory is correct.
New drive-through, we want to make sure we don't encounter such situations down the road. I think that's why we put in 5 and 10.
Cool. Thank you very much. I think it looks like it's probably a pretty good attempt at alleviating a problem that we have. and would help the applicant and probably help our traffic situation out. I think it's likely to. I open up for discussion. Mr. Chair.
I don't see it hurting or making matters worse than what it is now. And if it's going to help Culvers be more successful,
I would agree. I think that it's an attempt to try to solve a problem, but I still believe that it may not solve the problem. Because you're still pushing the stacking further back and you're inviting more people to come in because there's a short line. So, but you got to try, right?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the Planning Commission then if, the applicant's requesting a modification from the stacking space requirement, are we of the opinion that that would be a beneficial thing that we ought to approve? Anybody think that's not a good idea, would be my question to the commissioners?
I think they're improving the stacking. I mean, if you look at the numbers, right? I think they're improving what is currently there. So it's not making it worse. Yes.
Would it be fair then also to say that the board believes that the circulation plan at the entrance is satisfactory? Anybody think that's not satisfactory?
what I see is that according to their diagrams, they're able to handle the fire, the dumpster, and delivery.
I'd also open for discussion, do you think we ought to place a requirement on there for the one-way circulation along the back row? Does anyone think that's not a good idea?
I don't think it's, I mean, I'd go along with it because they're gonna just mark the road. I don't think it'll ever happen, but it isn't gonna hurt to mark the road if that's what they're gonna do.
Mr. Chair, does the applicant think that that would be a good idea?
We're certainly on board with that, yeah. I mean, it certainly can't hurt, so.
I do have one comment. Ms. Krishna, I'm an ex-math teacher and geometry. A trapezoid is a four-sided figure. This one has at least 5. I apologize.
Thank you. I stand corrected. I just looked at it, so like, okay, it's this way. You're right. I did not note that corner over there.
Note that it is a pentagonal figure.
I just didn't pay attention to the corner.
It has 7. This one's only 3 feet long. It's kind of a funky little thing.
Then we're getting out into multiple hexagons or beyond. Just a little light side on that. I'm sorry.
Weird one.
Irregular.
One last question on my end. Can you point out where the bike racks will go?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I was able to work that out with Vidya, and it should be on this plan here. The intent is like she suggested, to bring it close to the main entrance. So we were looking at areas of existing sidewalk, not to create more, that would be functional for the pedestrians to continue to use the site, not impede any of the parking for existing parking or for existing cars. So we chose right here at this corner. It would look like the little loop is what the current plan is for. So we'd place one along the north side and one along the west side near the main entrance here. We still have plenty of throat width for customers to continue in and out. Yeah, I meant to mention that. Thank you.
Where the bike would be parked north-south and then east-west for the one on the north side.
It's not to extend out, yep.
Yep. Any other questions, comments? Okay, do we have any public comment on this?
Mr. Chairman, there's nobody with their hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Then planning commissioners, do we have any action on this?
Mr. Chair, it would be,
Commissioner Jarr?
I would move at this time to grant the applicant MCon Building Corporation on the Culvers, the preliminary and final site plan approval to construct an additional drive-through lane at the site located at 11001 Belleville Road, based on the analysis and subject to the conditions in the McKenna letter dated 30 April 2024, the Fishback letter dated 1st of May 2024, the Van Buren Township Fire Report dated 23 April 2024, noting the feedback and concerns from the Planning Commission that the requested modification from stacking space requirement is approved, and the circulation plan at the entrance is found to be satisfactory, with the additional condition that the applicant shall work with staff to establish one-way circulation signage on the southern part of the site. I submit for support and discussion.
Support.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jar, support by Commissioner Creel. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we will call vote, please.
Yes.
Sherry Bud,
Yes.
Peter Creel, Jackson Paul, Jeff,
Yes.
Brian Cullen.
Yes. You have your approval. You're welcome. Okay, moving ahead. We have zoning, item number 2, zoning ordinance amendment for agritourism. It is a consideration of amendments to section 2.102, specific terms, 5.102, agricultural retail sales, 3.109, AG agricultural and estate district, and 9.102, minimum number of parking spaces required of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance to provide regulations for agricultural tourism or agritourism. Do we have a presentation by the staff? Director Akers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will turn it over to our planner, Ms. Christian.
Thank you, Director Akers, members of the commission. The last time the agritourism ordinance was before you, you made a recommendation to send it to the Board of Trustees. There was a gentleman, a resident who was in the audience who during public comment expressed concern regarding the requirement of the 200-foot buffer. And we had decided, we told the Planning Commission, we will look into that concern. And Dr. Akers and myself went and asked the GIS person to actually plot out all the properties that are zoned ag that meet the minimum requirement of 10 acres, which is what you need in order to have an agritourism business. Map them all out and let's see how many properties are there. And it's included in your packet, all the properties. And then we saw how many of these would be functional if we asked for the 200-foot buffer. We realized that there are lots of parcels that are 10 acres and greater than that, but they have a total width or frontage on a public road of only maybe 303 or 400 feet. Technically, taking out 200-foot buffers from your way means you cannot build on that parcel. So the way our ordinance is written is we say the buffer needs to be left intact with no disturbance in. And the reason we put it in is the recommendation when Director Powers and myself looked at ordinance was agritourism businesses are on the growth and they are really popular. I mean, you have to see DeBuck's Farms. I was mentioning to Director Akers, my Facebook feed is just filled with beautiful pictures of tulips and DeBuck's Farms comes up all the time. It is really, really successful. And hopefully other businesses that will start up will also be successful. So the intent behind the 200-foot buffer was having a successful business in what is essentially our rural residential area does not impede on those who just want to be residents in this area. You know, we don't take away from their quality of living because we said it's okay to have business next door to them. That said, we realized that the ordinance as it's written will basically not allow most people to even have an agritourism business. So we decided that it needs to come back before you because we wanted guidance from the Plan Commission. The choices would be either based upon analysis of what the widths of parcels are, what is the range, to either reduce the width of the buffer that we are proposing, or to allow for Planning Commission to determine what, if any, activity can take place within the buffer. Right now, the ordinance says you cannot touch the buffer, no activity can take place in the buffer. Maybe there is some passive part of agritourism that can take place within the buffer that won't be disturbing to the neighbors at that distance, at a more reduced distance, while still allowing for the parcel to be viable for an agritourism business itself. So we thought it needed to be brought back before you for discussion so that we need to possibly amend the text of the ordinance that we brought before you. We don't want the ordinance to be something that is right off the bat a non-functional ordinance. So either consider reducing the width of the buffer or decide if you want to allow some limited amount of activity within the buffers or allow the Planning Commission to consider a mix of both, depending upon where the parcel is located or what is the close proximity to maybe single-family residential uses. There is a range of buffers that you can approve, anywhere from say 75 to 200, or you can allow activities up to a certain point within the buffer. We will bring back those samples to you, what kind of activities, and you can decide which would be acceptable and not. But we did want to bring this back before you rather than just proposing something and telling you, oh, decided the ordinance doesn't work and here's a different one. So we're looking to you for guidance on what would you like us to suggest when we bring it back for you again.
Commissioners, comments?
Chair, I guess I have a question. So the concern is the potential of having a business next to a residential area, right? Is that's real? So there is potential if you're not limiting, if you're maintaining, was it 10 acres for this, as far
Right.
as the smallest? I mean, I think you have to put some restrictions on it. So maybe it's not, maybe it's tied to, well, maybe you have to, you have to make some kind of verbiage for adjacencies to residential neighborhoods. And that may limit their ability to do it even though, because some of these are pretty narrow.
Yeah.
And it might mean that they just can't do it. I mean, to have, to exaggerate, to have a mile-long site that's 10 feet wide is not gonna, you know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. So, maybe to state a buffer from residential, and that might actually take off some of these anyway. Some may not apply for the uses that we're considering for these. Go ahead.
The AG district is residential, right? It's residential estates. Ag is farms and estates. So it's not like it's, if you're already in ag, you're already bordering a residential district. This is happening residential district.
So would you like to make a distinction between the uses? Because when we say agritourism, it goes anywhere from cider mills and wineries and seasonal outdoor mazes
Yeah.
to something as simple as a bed and breakfast use. Now, bed and breakfast use on a smaller parcel with this, it's not going to, you don't need a 200-foot
Right.
buffer for that. It's basically a home with a few people as guests. So maybe we split out the uses depending upon the intensity of the uses, because some of the agritourism uses are way more intense than others.
Could I ask I don't know it off the top of my head, and I usually know these kind of things off the top of my head, but I don't remember what the setbacks are in the AG district. For, let's say, a farm, the actually being agriculturally used as a farm business, what's their how far from the property line do you have to build the barn?
I'm not sure we have a setback for farming operations
right?
no, we do not. We will have it for structures in ag districts, not for farming operations. You can pretty much
Farm right up
plant
to
your
the, you can
alfalfa to
farm
where-
right up to the line,
Exactly.
and there's a setback where you have to, the barn can't be on the line.
Exactly. Your accessory structures, pole barns or anything, tractor, shed storing, those have to have setbacks, but you can pretty much farm right up to
Any
here.
idea what the setback is? Do you remember?
So I think for agricultural buildings, I think it's 40 feet.
40, yeah.
I think,
I'd hate to have a setback that would, then we get someone who's got a bunch of buildings on the property. They've got some pole barns, they got a really nice old barn from the, 1800s, I don't know. And they're being told they can't run agritourism because their existing structure is 40 feet from the property line. And the agritourism says they have to be, 100 or 200. That would be a real bummer too, because we would like to see some of those older structures get used.
Could you grandfather in existing structures?
There is no, I don't believe there is
No
a
clause in
caveat
there
that
I
lets
saw.
Not in there now.
Not in there now, anyway.
You pick operations. I mean, if somebody is, say, growing corn or raspberries or strawberries,
Right.
do you need a 200-foot buffer? I mean, what's wrong in picking strawberries up till,
Right up to the line.
or 40 feet, even if you want to be reasonable so that you don't have screaming kids next to a house next door who don't need it.
Are we able to grant variances if we need to? Like if we, move forward with the 200, someone comes forward in 6 months and says, I've got 180 feet, is that enough?
So we wouldn't call it variance at that point. You don't want to call it variance automatically runs permanently with the land. So you want to build in flexibility for the planning commission under the special land use provisions.
Right.
So the planning commission we can add some caveats based upon individual lot configurations to allow the planning commission some flexibility to decide, if this is a UPIC operation versus this is a corn maze where you're going to have 100 people screaming and fall through it, with the noise traveling because there's not that much foliage on the trees. There is a difference. Although we have a whole bunch of uses listed over here, some of the uses are definitely way more intense than others. So maybe
Break
the
out
use classification needs to be separated by the buffers, and I would prefer to allow the planning commission flexibility. I don't want to write an ordinance that becomes so absolute, then the first case that comes before you, you're like, well, here's the problem.
Well, and through the
That's
chair,
not-
I don't want the ordinance to be so restrictive either.
No.
That's not the
I-
intent.
I mean, if it is as easy as saying that the planning commission has the ability to, whatever the words need to be, right? But to grant an exception by case and by shape of the parcel and things like that, I'd be fine with that.
But you're also looking at tying use, maybe setting some setbacks based on use and then having flexibility for those.
Correct, because
Okay,
all of
I like
these
that.
are special land uses. So you
Yeah.
will have control based upon public health, safety, welfare, quality of life issues. That is always there as a special land use. But we also want to provide some standards because you might get an agritourism use that we have not thought about, that you're like, okay, this is not what we want to see over here. So I want you to have enough, all the uses listed, but with enough flexibility for you to be able to say this use actually fits the area where they're proposing it, and the reduced setbacks make sense on this.
Right.
So I think the use profile probably we will revisit and make a determination of what setbacks, if any, or what range of setbacks would be applicable, and to give the planning commission flexibility to make that determination.
I think that's good.
Have a set of ordinances that requires a property owner to come and, sorry, agriculture, come and do some horse trading to figure out, whether or not they'd be allowed to do it. The ordinance should spell out what's
Yeah.
allowed, we're in a society of regulations and ordinances that permit certain applications. We don't want to have it be someone who owns a piece of property and they're a swell person and they've been here a long time to be able to just come in and get whatever they want. That's not how it's supposed to work. So we really do need to have some kind of verbiage that is more than just the planning commission can do whatever the heck it wants
Right,
to
I
do,
agree.
because that's not fair,
Sure.
right? And that's,
That would vary depending upon what the planning commission is composed of, the members of, and you don't want to have.
here, this is a different planning commission than the one we had 7 years was.
No, I'm not suggesting that we remove all the standards and leave it completely open-ended. There will be standards, but there will be standards based upon which you can make a determination. It will be factual, not just subjective.
The current line that came into question is that a 200-foot open buffer shall be provided on all sides of the property not abutting a roadway. Okay. Agricultural, commercial, tourism, business activities shall not be allowed within this buffer area. Where possible, crops shall remain within this buffer area to help maintain the agricultural character of the site. The important part there is, I think, I wasn't on the subcommittee and I didn't participate in the crafting of it, but I think the intent, if I understood it, was to try and maintain that farm-like feel, the agricultural look when you're driving down the
Right.
road. You don't want to have it be a giant mega mart with some fields in the back. You want to be able to see it maybe should look a little farmy in the front. Now, whether or not a 200-foot open buffer or a 300-foot open buffer or a 40-foot open buffer is the right number, I can't really say, but I do know that the intent was to maintain the agricultural character of the site. So if we were to go with the standard ag setbacks, as long as the use maintained the agricultural character of the site, allowances may be made for increasing the cultural character and agricultural character of the site, then that seems like that might be in the zone. I mean, we don't want to just completely get rid of all of the setbacks, and we don't
Oh,
wanna-
absolutely not. It's just
Yeah.
that the way this particular clause is written,
Yeah.
it says where possible crops shall remain within this buffer, but agri-tourism business activities. So you can have crops, but you cannot have a U-Pick operation.
Well, you can't have horses. Horses aren't a
Oh,
crop,
it's,
right?
yeah, true. So it's like you can grow your crops, but you can't allow anybody to pick it. So maybe at the 200-foot boundary, you pick up and you dump everything. No, that's not what the intent was.
Like raspberry, you're not gonna have a huge monster field of raspberries.
Right, and we are not talking about putting like a carousel or like a
Right.
go-kart racing right at that 40-foot setback. That's not what we want.
Right.
And that would not be keeping in line with the agricultural character of the site, having the mini combine racers, which I think we saw in yes meeting. So yeah, I would say some kind of verbiage that maintains the ag district setbacks and has some allowances for, look, you can use it, but you gotta maintain the agricultural character of the site.
Yes, there will be setback requirements. We are not just going to completely like take out the whole setbacks. There'll be setbacks. If it is strictly an agricultural use such as Yupik Farms, it can be done within the existing farm setbacks. If it involves more of a commercial enterprise such as a winery and that will be. And if it is
So what you're
amusement
suggesting
stuff.
is maybe having, if it really is crops, then right up to the property
Right, they go
line
to
is
the
fine
property,
because
that's
that's
what you
ag. But if it's a structure-like thing,
Right.
a little car track or a carousel, that's like a structure like a silo or.
That'll probably be further because it
Right.
can be noisy. It's not merely a
And,
pole
but yeah,
barn.
so that would need to obey a different set of setbacks than, say, just the field
Correct.
with people walking on it.
We're also, some of those is you got 200 or 300-foot frontage of ag. Right next to it is another 200 or 300-foot frontage of ag. That, and then on this side, you got a house that sits up close. So your setbacks, if you're setting your setbacks to protect somebody, on one side, there's nothing there but farmland anyways, and on the other side, you got homes that you're trying to offer
they're-
that buffer.
they're-
So a set number for a
Distance from
setback.
adjacent structure type rule, you know, or if you had a setback, say you had 200 total feet of setback, the smallest side not to be less than 40 feet, right? So it's like, they have to have 200 feet of setback, but they could put the structure offset really far to one side of the property and then have, you know, their 200, we do that in some of our setback rules, right? Where it's like, you have to have 100 feet of total setback, smallest side 10 feet or something like that.
Yeah, or if you say if a use is going to be established next to an already established residential
Yes.
use.
Yes.
That person came first. So you're establishing a new use, protection needs to be offered. If you happen to be closer to this side and somebody in the future comes to build a house, well, they know what they're building next to. So it's, we will revisit the use profile and the setbacks to give a little bit more. 200 sounded great, like on paper and all the other ordinances, but more of the ordinances we looked at, they were most of the Western Michigan and more the rural. I guess for them, they weren't, we are in a unique position. Although we are in a urban area, we have our rural residential community also. So we have to tailor it to fit.
On a 40-acre parcel, a 200-foot open buffer isn't a big ask, but on a 10-foot
Yeah, there's
know,
nothing left. over there.
rectilinear property, or pentagonal, I'm not sure which the right term, trapezoidal, that it may not be quite the right ask. so-
Geometry lesson today.
Yes.
They didn't cover that in math, they didn't cover that in training this year.
So I have a good idea where the planning commission would like to go. So if you would give us a little time, we will rework this and bring it back before you with suggested language so you can fine tune it what you think would be.
And in defense of you a little bit, we were looking at the Bucks, which is a huge,
Not all operations are going to be on that scale. That
Right.
is probably one of its kind. But we don't want to offer a business opportunity that somebody might be so interested in doing and then say, oh, right off the bat, you can't comply with anything, so you can't have your business. That's not fair either.
right.
So,
That would trigger a variance request, and that would happen twice, and then we'd have to change the ordinance.
yes, exactly. And
Exactly.
yeah, we don't want to write an ordinance that right off the bat, somebody has to seek a variance from, which means it's a badly written ordinance to
Yeah,
start
it's
with.
badly written, yeah.
Through the chair, I guess through some experience, I think just because you got a piece and you're doing ag and you got somebody that wants to build a house there, they know what they're building next to and that don't work. If they move there and build a house and they don't like what's going on, they will fight what's going on there. We've experienced that when we had our dairy herd. When Haggerty Sub went in, they did not like the cows. Been there forever, but that didn't make a lot of difference to how those folks felt. But
Familiar with the Right to Farm Act?
well, that wasn't in place, that wasn't in
Haggerty
place
Sub
back
was
then.
built back in the late
70.
60s and
Like 70s.
70s, early 70s.
Farm Act was also somewhere around that time. I think probably due to situations like that, the Right to Farm Act went in.
Yeah.
You cannot disrupt an existing farming operation that is already there because you came in and now you decided you don't like what a farm comes with.
They didn't like the smell of the manure. They didn't like the corn stalks because their kids were going and smoking their weed in the corn. I mean, I can tell you a whole gambit of stuff, you know, that my in-laws have faced over the course of the, and I've lived there 50-some, better than 50 years, but for what they had to put in, yeah. So people will move in and then they want it their way. They even ran my husband off with his sprayer and ended up on the ground. They thought they could speed around that big sprayer and they caught the wheel and down he went. It happens.
Okay, so we're gonna recommend that staff is gonna take it back, rework, and bring it back before us.
Don't think we need a motion for that or anything.
No.
No, you don't, just.
Okay, with that, is there any other discussions, updates, anything to bring forward?
No, the only thing I wanted to highlight was that the next meeting's on May 22nd. We're going to have our application for Tractor Supply before us on May 22nd. We're also going to have an application, or two applications from Ashley Capital, one for 2 new buildings and then the other for a site plan amendment at their Crossroads Building 11, which is the large one they're building off Van Born, excuse me.
My
Okay.
understanding, Mr. Chair, is you will not be at that meeting.
Correct.
Means I'll be chairing it.
You will be the man in charge. You will be the big man. Okay, anything else? I do want to mention that I want to pass along our thanks to Director Akers for our meeting last week. I thought it was very productive as far as the joint meeting was concerned between the 3 planning commissions. And in meeting with the couple of the commissioners afterwards, they were very thankful that we're getting together and trying to work forward towards a combined community. And so again, thank you for your time and effort and what you did forward getting that prepared.
Thank you.
Other than that, I have nothing else. Nobody else, anything? Then that means we entertain that motion for,
I move to adjourn the meeting, Mr. Chair.
and to support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.
Whole movie about that, isn't it?